This one's coming from the folks over at Dropsite News, who have been doing some wonderful work over the recent months and really in general. I've shouted them out a few times, but they're doing some really great work as it pertains to Jeffrey Epstein. This one just came out 5 days ago, December 10th. Ask Jeffrey. Epstein ran Wexner's pro-Israel philanthropy machine, emails reveal. The Wexner Foundation has long claimed Epstein did not make decisions regarding the use of the foundation's funds. New emails show that is flagrantly false. And many of us have suspected that for a long time. For those who don't know who Les Wexner is the billionaire founder of the Limited Brands. Here, let me go ahead and just pull that up real quick at theconsciousresistance.com because I've reported on him quite a bit over the years. If you go to theconsciousresistance.com and you check out our Epstein network archives right here, or if you just search Les Wexner, you're going to find dozens of reports I've done on Les Wexner because he is really the money man. You can see me and Whitney Webb talking about him years ago. New evidence connecting Jeffrey Epstein to Les Wexner, the evidence for Jeffrey Epstein's Mossad connection, and that's a picture of Les Wexner right there. And so we've been covering this. We've been focused on him. And in fact, I think it's been a big shame that Les Wexner has mostly got away. In fact, back in September, you guys might remember, I went to D.C. for the big press conference for Jeffrey Epstein. And I actually asked, as you can see here, here's the video of me asking at the Epstein Files Transparency press conference, asking Thomas Massie, Ro Khanna, the lawyers and the victims, if any of them have anything to say about Les Wexner. And most of them said no. But Annie Farmer, as you can see right here on screen, she steps up and basically says, look, Les Wexner hasn't been held accountable. He's definitely involved and people need to investigate him. So because of that, I got his name back in the news. He was reported on again in the local news in Ohio, where he's from, which is where the Limited Brands was originally found. Of course, that's the Limited store, that's Victoria's Secret and other things. And Les Wexner is most infamously, as I talk about here, part of the Mega Group. And you can see here, Ghislaine Maxwell sentenced to 20 years. The Mega Group gets away. And I've talked about this elsewhere. You can find that in the evidence for Jeffrey Epstein's Mossad connections, talking about Les Wexner and the Mega Group, which is basically just a wealthy group of Jewish financiers, that's what they call themselves, who say that they are there to advocate for Israel and for Zionism. So Les Wexner has escaped any kind of repercussions. And he basically publicly said, I knew Jeffrey Epstein for a couple of years. Then we found out he was stealing from me and we got rid of him. End of story. And then after that, he's just stayed in his mansion in Ohio and the press has pretty much ignored him. Now, what this new report from Dropsite News is showing that the Wexner Foundation, which is, of course, Les Wexner's foundation, that they continue to interact and deal with Jeffrey Epstein and even let Jeffrey Epstein make decisions for their foundation well after Epstein was exposed in 2005 and then released in 2008. And so we have clear evidence that Les Wexner was lying. So it says here, our latest article on the life and times of Jeffrey Epstein is based on a cache of emails obtained by the whistleblower nonprofit Distributed Denial of Secrets, which provided access to them to Dropsite News. And this Distributed Denial of Secrets, this group their emails have been kind of a wealth of stories over the last few weeks, few months, really. This cache includes the undisclosed names of Epstein victims, as well as explicit images, meaning it can't simply be published in whole without some redactions, but many of the messages can quickly be made public. And to that end, Dropsite is collaborating with the team that built Jmail to make news emails available and searchable there beginning this week. So if you don't know about Jmail, I found out about this a couple of weeks ago. I posted about it online. Jmail.world is basically, this looks like a Gmail account, right? But you see in the top right corner, that's Jeffrey Epstein's picture. They pretty much took all of Jeffrey Epstein's emails that have been released. They formatted them so it looks like you're logged in a Gmail account as Jeffrey Epstein. And it's honestly, it's pretty crazy here. And you can search by Larry Summers, Alan Dershowitz, Noam Chomsky. You can search by name, Sarah Kellen, and find those related emails. Every single one of these emails are actually emails that Jeffrey Epstein received or sent. And if you see at the top of here, it says, Yahoo emails are rolling out now. 18,000 emails from Dropsite News' investigation, originally released by DDoS Secrets, new batches added weekly. View it here. You click that and it takes you to the emails specifically. It says here, you're in Jeffrey Epstein's Yahoo inbox. New emails rolling out via Dropsite News. learn more about this. And then again, you can search and find the different people that he was talking to, including Les Wexner. So it's kind of weird and cool at the same time. You can just search and find all kinds of topics. So if you wanted to search, let's just say Israel, for example, it'll show you every email that mentions Israel, and it's indexed, and it's meant to look like Gmail, but of course they call it Jmail. And so you can see emails with Ehud Barak, the former prime minister of Israel, and on and on and on. So it's a really great resource. So Dropsite News, working with Jmail, have now made these emails searchable. And here's Les Wexner with Jeffrey Epstein and some other person who's redacted. 6 months after Jeffrey Epstein's death in August 2019, the philanthropic foundation founded by the billionaire fashion tycoon Les Wexner published an independent review of Epstein's involvement in the organization. In response to concerns raised by donors and alumni of foundation-funded programs, the Wexner Foundation is one of the largest contributors to pro-Israel causes in the United States. The review claimed that the Wexner Foundation staff had, quote, no contact with Epstein after his resignation as a trustee in September 2007. And before that, he, quote, played no role in the management or administration of the foundation's operations and had, quote, no meaningful role in the foundation's budget or finances and, quote, did not make decisions regarding the use of the foundation's funds. None of that is true. Hundreds of leaked emails from Jeffrey Epstein's Yahoo inbox from 2005 to 2008 contradict the Wexner report. Inside the Wexner's family financial office in Ohio, staff treated Jeffrey Epstein as a de facto chief financial officer, where major decisions about taxes, lines of credit, 8-figure fund transfers, politically sensitive grants were routed through Epstein's lawyers and required Jeffrey Epstein's approval. So not even just that, okay, yeah, Epstein was around and he was kind of a friend of the foundation. They were seeking Jeffrey Epstein's approval for these different things. This new email cache was vetted and published by DDS and contains many of the same forensic signatures as the data set reported by Bloomberg earlier this year. Officials from the Wexner Foundation, the law office that conducted the review, and Epstein's former legal counsel did not respond to requests. The emails show that Darren Indyke, who served as both Epstein's personal lawyer and attorney for the foundation, was the middleman in such communications, cloaking Epstein's foundation-related activities with attorney-client privilege. So basically, by sending them to the attorney, they could say these are privileged communications between a client and his attorney, and thus they shouldn't be released, but they've been leaked. Indyke is also the executor of Epstein's estate, which has been accused of obstructionism for withholding privileged emails from civil lawsuits and congressional subpoenas. The Wexner Foundation's independent reviewers did not have access to the emails published here because, according to the 2020 report, the foundation's archive of email does not go back to Epstein's time as a trustee. On paper, the Wexner's family's philanthropic foundation and their retail empire, once home to Victoria's Secret, Abercrombie and Fitch, and you guys might remember that the dude over at Abercrombie and Fitch, the CEO or one of the founders, he was also implicated in sex trafficking and sexual abuse. Bath and Body Works were largely separate and largely had their own staff. But in practice, as is typical of such foundations, one small family office sat over both the family's fortune and philanthropy. Internal emails between Epstein, Indyke, and Wexner's staff show Epstein as the effective boss of the family office and the real gatekeeper of the Wexner's money. And email after email, Wexner's financial controller, Peg Ugland, wrote to Indyke with account balances for a web of Wexner's entities, charitable trusts, private investment vehicles, and personal trading accounts with a recurring refrain. Please ask Jeffrey if I can transfer. Why in the heck would Les Wexner? I mean, this honestly kind of turns some of the sort of claims on its head, including my own. Like I said, I mean, we've largely thought that Les Wexner was the boss of Jeffrey Epstein and maybe that Wexner was the conduit to Israel. But then why would the Wexner Foundation be asking Jeffrey for permission to make transfers? Epstein was the final authority on which Wexner's entity should cover his expense, how to move assets between entities, and whether to approve large fund transfers for the Wexner's accounts. Epstein continued to advise on IRS filings and multi-million-dollar transactions until at least December 2007, which was 2 months after he had supposedly resigned as a trustee. So here's the statement they show, an excerpt of the Wexner Foundation's independent review, where they claim, as you can see here, although Epstein held the title of president of the Wexner Family Financial Office, there's no evidence that he played any significant role. He did not make decisions regarding the foundation's use of funds. That is a lie. Survey says that's a lie. Or what's the Maury, the show Maury, for those who remember that? Lie detector says, paternity test says that's a lie. Under Epstein's financial stewardship and after his departure, the Wexner Foundation bankrolled pro-Israel charities like College Hillels and Free Birthright Trips. These programs had a common mission of teaching young diasporic Jews to define their religious identity. So Epstein is like directing communications and emails. Make sure it's a U.S. charity. Do we have following requirements? Ask Harry. If okay, make from the foundation. So there's clearly emails showing that Epstein is the one making financial decisions, the exact opposite of what Wexner claimed. Here's another one. Somebody named Darren wrote, please ask Jeffrey if it is, or Peg Uglin to Darren wrote, please ask Jeffrey it is okay to transfer $1 million from WPH Core at Bear Stearns to WPH Core at JP Morgan Chase. I have invoices totaling $600,000 for Beretta and Purdy. The WPH Core account is down to $134,000. The BS account has $2.3 million, and the ML account has $680,000. And then Epstein at the top says yes. So Epstein is clearly guiding things, and WPH stands for Wexner Personal Holdings Core account. And so he's just helping them decide to move money between Wexner's various accounts. I mean, we could go on and on. There's numbers of emails here. Abigail Wexner, which is Les Wexner's wife, she is also denied, any involvement and any knowledge of this. These emails show that is complete bullshit. And according to Dropsite News, Epstein was introduced to Wexner in 1986 by Robert Meister, whose firm provided insurance for Wexner's clothing company, The Limited. Epstein quickly became Wexner's most trusted investment advisor, and by 1991, Wexner had signed over to Epstein complete power of attorney over his estate and all of his affairs. And, I've talked about this in the past, that there is some speculation that they may have been gay lovers. I mean, for whatever it's worth, that's just one theory that's out there on the table. You might know and have heard the story that Wexner sold Epstein the mansion that became Epstein's mansion. Some say $1, some basically say for free, for $0, but clearly they were buddies. That year, 1991, the New York Times described Epstein as president of Wexner Investment Company, and nobody has disputed that he had a major influence there. Yet the Wexner Foundation has maintained his influence did not extend to the iconic pro-Israel philanthropy organization. That same year, Wexner gave Epstein personal control over his vast fortune. Wexner formed the Study Group, which again, the Study Group is what is also known as the Mega Group. There's only really been one mainstream report on it, and that was the Wall Street Journal. As you can see here, titans of industry joined forces to work for Jewish philanthropy. This is from 1998. The Study Group, also known as the Mega Group. So it says here, the same year, Wexner gave Epstein personal control of his fortune. Wexner formed the Study Group, a group of ultra-wealthy Jewish entrepreneurs who developed philanthropic initiatives to fund support for Israel. Meister's wife, Wendy, also introduced Leslie to Abigail Koppel, a young Israel-American attorney, 25 years his junior. And that eventually became Les Wexner's wife, Abigail Wexner. Epstein was named trustee of Wexner's Philanthropic Foundation, and he supervised the drafting of Leslie and Abigail's prenuptial agreement before they were married in January 1993. So Epstein is deeply involved in his life and relationship. He's creating the prenup agreement. The marriage cemented a deeper tie between Wexner and the state of Israel. He was marrying into Israel's founding generation. Abigail's father, Yehuda Koppel, was the commander of a special operations unit of Haganah, the paramilitary army that created the state of Israel in 1948. Haganah formed the core of the Israeli Defense Force and carried out the ethnic cleansing of Palestine, later termed the Nakba. Wexner's father-in-law played a foundational role in the birth of Israel's military intelligence. According to the diary of Israel's founding father, David Ben-Gurion, Koppel served in Shai, Haganah's intelligence arm, and the predecessor to Israel's Central Military Intelligence Directorate, Amman. During the Nakba, his unit conducted sabotage operations involving vehicle hijackings and explosives. So, Wexner, his wife's family, his father-in-law, deeply embedded into the Israeli intelligence and to the Israeli Zionist apparatus in general. I'll just read a little bit more and we'll go on, because this is not the only story. Again, like I said, this is Wexner back in the news, which is a good thing. Unfortunately, it's not getting enough attention. Dropsite News is doing their job. They're doing a great job, but it's not really making it out to the wider public, unfortunately, which is why I need you guys to share this video. Since 1983, the Wexner Foundation has contributed hundreds of millions of dollars to Israeli-linked charitable causes, quietly underwriting flagship pro-Israel institutions in America. Although Leslie is the family's familiar public face, Epstein's emails suggest Abigail has become far more active than Leslie and the family's finances after their marriage. As both the trustee of the Wexner Foundation and the director of the Wexner Family Charitable Fund, Abigail sits on both sides of the philanthropic funding pipeline. How money enters the family fund and how much of that money flows out to charitable causes. And of course, they say charitable causes, but we all know that this is just a front. It's a cover for them funding Israeli interests. Epstein and Abigail sometimes emailed directly, but most critical financial issues raised by Wexner's family office were routed to Epstein through Indike, who is both Epstein's personal lawyer and the secretary of the Wexner Foundation. So I think I've read enough here. I will invite you, really just, kind of really highly encourage you guys to go read this article on your own because it goes deeper. But that's not all. That's not the end of it.